I'm a software engineer at Microsoft. In February 10th, that was my birthday, I received diabetes diagnosis. I didn't know anything about it. I was told it's 32. All the nurses were telling me, you need to be admitted, this is serious. I was seeing as if it was an overreaction because I just drove here, that's what I thought. But it was a big deal. And afterwards, after I learned about diabetes, I think I'll talk about that. So the first thing is, I didn't know that I was even sick. I had traveled to the US for my Christmas holidays, and then when I came back, I was weak, I was tired. I immediately got onto on-call at work, and our on-call is very intensive. So you work at night, if there are incidents, you can have meetings for 8 hours. So I was just saying, I'm tired because I'm overworking, or there were so many excuses that I had that looking back right now, I can see why everything was happening. So one day my gym instructor just told me, something is off with you. Can you go to the hospital, do these tests? So he gave me a list of blood work tests that I need to do and all those things. So I went to the hospital, then that's when they discovered the diagnosis. And it is LADA, which is latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. So it is a form of diabetes that borrows features from both type 1 and type 2. So the features from type 1 being it's an autoimmune. So it's an autoimmune condition where your beta cells are being destroyed by your autoimmune. So I think one of the best things I had upon admission was the explanation that Dr. Ombui, who was my doctor, gave me. So it was very simple, clear, and straightforward. I think it's very easy for doctors to assume patients won't understand things, which it is a sensible thing. You don't want to waste your time. But that simple explanation, it got rid of so much uncertainty, fear, and doubt. If you don't explain to your doctors, to your patients, this is what's happening, they'll say, this doctor is saying it's not type 1, it's not type 2. In fact, this happened to my aunt, where she says almost all the doctors that she's been seeing, they don't know what they're saying because they're not explaining it clearly. I do know that they know what they're saying, but maybe the explanation is not clear enough. So my one point I'd like to say is try to get a few set of explanations that you'll be giving children, you'll be giving different kinds of people, and then the clearer they get it, the better they'll be able to manage their disease. So the type 2 feature is because it's adult onset, but it's not type 1, it's not type 2. It's not type 1 because you still do have insulin production, even though it's degraded, and it's going to type 1 eventually. So this is my warning signs that I had. From a few months before, that chart over there this chart is my weight. Like 3 years ago, I was 119. And then it dropped. Then this is when I came back from the US, and you can see it goes until 84 point something. I assumed I was working out. I was very fit, but I wasn't. So I had weight loss that for me it was not unexpected because I was actually working out. I had excessive thirst and urination, which I assumed was because I was drinking a lot of water. I had sugar cravings, sodas, that was something new. I didn't drink as much soda as I started drinking. I had extreme fatigue in the morning, but that I explained because I was working a lot. Post-meal energy crashes where after eating my lunch, I just passed out. No food tasted good. I've watched some videos about people's symptoms, and I haven't had this before, but even meat, I used to go to 5-star hotels just to see if anything tastes good. Nothing tasted good. So that is one. And then a few days or weeks before diagnosis, I started getting bleeding gums, dry lips, confusion, anxiety, and I didn't know why. One of the things that I do remember clearly was I wrote down everyone's name. Whenever I met someone, like even went to the hospital, I wrote down the doctor's name, I wrote down the nurse's name because I kept forgetting, and I didn't know why I was forgetting. So it was very, I don't know how to explain it because I felt like I was losing my mind. And then after the diagnosis, it was a bit of a relief that I knew what was causing the problem. So this is my sugar readings since the February diagnosis. You can see it was around 30 something. Then it started, right now we are there is some spike over there because I was at the coast last week, and yeah, but so the initial readings were from 20. My time in range is 87 to 90. Average is that. My A1C is 5.8%, which is fairly good. And then consistent sugar patterns. I think there are some things and habits that as a diabetic you can do to make sure that your sugar is well regulated. I think hopefully I get some time to talk about that. And then this is a platform I wrote. While I was at the hospital, I tried looking into tools that I can use to manage my diabetes. Most of them, even the CGM tools and apps, they're not available in our region, which was very disappointing. And the tools for carb counting, calorie king, all these tools there's no reason for them not to be available in our region. Maybe because the foods or the policy or legal, I don't know why, but I started working on a platform to build complementary tools. One of the key goals of this platform is patients shouldn't have to pay to manage their diabetes. It should be something that's freely accessible. Of course, we can have premium features for healthcare providers and the rest, but a patient shouldn't need to pay to manage their diabetes. So if you visit mysukari.com, there is a sugar dashboard, which I'm working on integrating data from CGMs, like export data, and then it will pull and render charts like this for everyone. There is still some work that I need to get sorted, that I don't know how to average data, and so I'm working with the KDSG team. They have been very welcoming and supportive of this entire venture. So this is something that hopefully we can build upon. And then there is another part of this which you can start using immediately. You don't need to sign up. There is a carb counter. You just open the mysukari.com website, go to tools, there is carb counter. You can put in whatever food you want to eat. You can ask your patient to put in. I worked closely with a nutritionist and diabetes educator, Saulo. She might be here. And she gave me a lot of insight on the different kinds of foods, the carbs, all that, which I input into the system. It uses it to render. You can use a natural language because I feed that data to an AI and I tell it to estimate carbs. So that might be a useful feature. So what is working for me? What's making my sugar stable? Or these are my personal opinions. I'm not a doctor, obviously. So take it with that grain of salt. Firstly, morning walks. I take morning walks either 30 minutes or 1 hour. It's not intensive walk. I'm not running. I'm just walking. And after my walks, my sugar for that day is usually fairly stable. I don't have high spikes. Maybe it's because I also don't partake in high sugar diets. But the walks help a lot, regardless of, even before my diagnosis, on the days that I didn't take a morning walk, I couldn't work at all. So I only got productive at night. And coincidentally, that's when our US team is awake. So most meetings, I was working well. But if I did my morning walk, I still had energy during the day. I think because of the insulin sensitivity, but I'm not a doctor, so that I can just leave to you guys. Food response is different. Some people, maybe chapati doesn't spike their sugar. Chapati spikes my sugar a lot. Ugali as well. Rice doesn't as much. Githeri doesn't as much. And I love githeri, so that's good. And then book a session with an education, or diabetes education or nutritionist. I think that has been one of my most vital learnings. Like having a session with Saulo where she took me through insulin therapy, carb counting, correction factor, meal ratio. It was so informative because my mom has type 2, my grandmother has type 2. The things that they were telling me, and she's a PhD candidate, she's not some person who can't grasp things. The things they were telling me, after learning this, I came and corrected them. What you're saying is not correct. So there is a lot of misinformation out there. So get your patient to book a session, even if it's a parent of a child, have them book a session with a nutritionist and educationist, because with that knowledge, then they don't have to go second guess their doctor, go search information from sources that are not reputable. And then things like keeping insulin at room temperature, that is something that for the first 3 days I didn't know. So I was taking cold insulin. That was, people say it's uncomfortable, but it's actually painful because the area that you inject gets tense and then it's just bad. Have a consistent basal time. This is for patients. learn to listen to your body. So your body actually tells you things, and I've been able to start learning to listen to my body by use of a CGM. So Grace and Yvonne helped me start using CGMs. So the beauty of a CGM is a continuous glucose monitor, so you're not pricking yourself every time. And they do have sometimes that they have misreadings. So if you have a patient that's going on to a CGM, just tell them, this is, I think I'll talk about it on the next slide, but that is one thing that helped me listen to my body. Don't stack insulin. Some patients you might have might panic. My sugar is too high, my sugar is too low, let me do insulin. That's the importance of the education and nutritionist session. They'll tell them, if you just took it 2 hours ago, wait, drink water, do this. If it's, there are things that are simple once you learn. Like if it's hypo is easier to treat than even hyper, because you can just do 15 grams of simple sugar, then complex. It's, and it's knowledge that they don't need to know so much to learn, in my opinion. And rise and fall of sugar, glucose is natural. So if they see it going up and down, they shouldn't just start panicking. So my CGM experience, I started using the CGM called Libre 2, which it's a small device that you plug into your hand, and it measures the, I think, interstitial fluid. It doesn't measure your blood. So there is a time gap between when your blood diffuses glucose into that fluid. So there is a small gap time between when the reading of the blood sugar and the CGM is accurate. But the beauty of it is almost always the readings are similar, or they're headed in the correct direction. So it's a nice, for me, I've had a nice experience with it. And then it helps me learn how to listen to my body. I know how to associate. I can just look at my watch. So I have it on my watch. I can just see, right now it's like a certain number. What do I do? Why is it at this number? It's very easy to not panic. If you're pricking, you don't know, you might do it because you're shaking, you might do it because you're feeling weak. So all that is not really that effective. But if you have something that's recording it for you, it has some, like the first day it might have an issue. I've only had issues maybe with 2 monitors. I've had it for the last over 2 months, but I highly recommend. The problem is you can also get a cover and put it on it. It's a bit costly. There are some disadvantages. It's a bit costly. If it is insured, this will be a lifesaver for so many people. And then, yeah. I think that's all for my presentation.
Thank you so much, Peter, for being vulnerable to share with us your story. So now we'll welcome Dr. Gaman to do his presentation. Then after this, we'll welcome the panelists, Dr. Abdullahi and Dr. Ban. Please have a seat. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done. So my life has been made easier. I was given extra time. Huh? So let's see. Are we okay? Good. So as I mentioned, my role is really to give you tips, practical tips on travel and diabetes. I saw it here on this screen, not on that screen, and not above there. Okay. Life is hard, eh? My mover is not working. Okay. So I should be good to go now? Okay, so basically I gave you a brief on the do's and the don'ts. Remember the travel letter. Remember telling the patients that they need to store their insulin properly. Remember that don't get too dramatic about, yes, you have to put it at 4 degrees. There are studies or there is data that it can be stable for 25 days, but that should not be misinterpreted. An important factor that I'd like to give on as a tip, tell them to carry something when they are on flights. I've seen people having hypos when they are about to take off and no one can serve them because they are taking off. They're supposed to be seated. So a snack is don't assume you can get everything on the plane. Take something with you. Tell the patient to take, monitoring is important. Hydration is important because as you go up, you get dehydrated. It can affect you especially. Have you seen patients coming in with decay after landing? How many of you have seen? Many times. You'll have a patient coming in decay after landing. They may have had poor sugar control, dehydration, the stress of travel, decay. So that happens all the time. So this is a slide that I put up, or I kind of put together, and it shows you the potency of insulin. So let's try and look at it realistically. If you store insulin at 4 degrees, it's stable for over 30 days. Remember, your threshold for potency is 90%. If insulin is 90% viable, it's potent, it's fine. It can be used for therapy. If you store insulin at 25 degrees, you can keep it up to close to 30 days when you're touching 90% there. So this is really efficacy loss. You can see that's 10% loss. So once you start going above there, now you know your insulin is not functioning properly. It could still be used, but you probably will not get the results. If you store it at 37 degrees, by day 7 or day 8, you've passed 90%. If you store it at 45, it's about by day 3. So this now takes us back to the questions we asked ourselves. Then why should we have these problems of insulin that comes in through parallel, non-cold chain methods? So here, this is what you normally would see. This is how insulin is brought in parallel. In a box, cargo hold, cleared, and it goes to the pharmacies, okay? So I simulated 2 scenarios. It's coming from a hot country with 2 to 3 days storage or 10 days storage. I'm just trying to show you the difference of if insulin is stored at different durations somewhere. So assuming wherever it was in a warehouse, it was not a cold chain, you start having the losses. The air transport, as I said, there's no loss in potency because it's 5 to 15 degrees. Then I say it comes into Kenya, it's distributed to a pharmacy, and a patient uses it for up to 28 days. So the total loss of potency is between 12 to 22 if it's 2 to 3 days storage, 7 to 10 days storage prior to shipment, it's 16 to 30%. So you now have efficacies less than 90%. Then the next question comes, but some patients are using the same insulin, but they are fine. Some others are not fine. There could be variables. Maybe sometimes that pharmacist gets his 2-3 days storage shipment, some days it takes longer, okay? You may have different patients. If you have a type 2, 78 to 88% could be okay. With type 1, who's well controlled, they may get away. But when it's this 70 to 84%, it's not safe for type 1, and it's a borderline use for a type 2 diabetic. So what I'm trying to say is, I'm just opening up your minds to the way we have insulins outside and the challenges we face. When you get an insulin not working, you could be having this scenario. So this is also just to show you, yes, you can store it for 25 days, but doesn't mean you can just get insulin from anywhere and ship it out and say, okay, everything is fine. So, having said that, we deal a lot with truck drivers, tour guides, bus drivers, and really for these particular persons in Africa, there are problems with long exposure to heat, irregular meals, dehydration, hypoglycemia, and access to medical care. So really, preferred insulins here are basal insulins that have less risk of hypos, but again, you need to see what the patient particularly requires. There are methods they can carry their insulins. There are fryer cool pouches that just by pouring water can keep insulin at 24 to 25 degrees. You can use a flannel cloth, cheap, simple ways to use it. Just tell them, don't keep your insulin on the dashboard. They need to monitor regularly. And an important tip is, tell them, If they have a diarrhea and they're driving, or food poisoning, it may be a big problem. So try and have foods that are easily available, clean water, and ensure that actually they have smaller meals rather than larger meals to cause gastrointestinal problems. So this is what we can use, and this is something that is coming up as well. It's a pouch that was tested at about 36 degrees or so, and has a temperature sensor there that tells you if your insulin is bad, not bad, and it costs about $20. So it's a useful thing for someone to have. But simple things like a funnel pouch. And here in my next slide, I simulated a driver keeping his insulin there, okay? All right? And I simulating his driving to Congo from Nairobi. So how would his insulin, how will it be potent? If with no cooling, it will be at 90% when he reaches Congo. If he has a cold wrap, passive cooling, 95 to 97. If he has ventilation, it will be still 99% potent. And of course, if he had the other methods. So just trying to show you what and how we can use it. Now coming to travel through different time zones. We must understand this is an important thing because as you travel eastwards, your days shorten. If you're traveling to Malaysia, your day is shorter. So if you take the same amount of insulin, your risk of hypoglycemia. When you travel west to the States, your day is longer. So you need more insulin. That's a simple way of looking at things. So to simplify things, if you're traveling eastwards, you're not worried about your bolus insulin. Your bolus insulin is your short-acting insulin that you're taking with meals. So you don't worry about that. But your basal insulin, you can take it earlier, and when you arrive, you decrease the dose. If you're traveling westwards, you can take half your dose at the usual time and 50% at about 6 to 8 hours during the flight. Alternatively, you may add something more. If you're on premixed, you can advance it to 1 or 2 hours earlier if you're traveling eastwards and reduce your premixed dose by 20% at arrival because your day is shorter. If you're traveling westwards, you can split your premix, give 50% at that time, 50% 6 to 8 hours, and you may take an extra dose called a bridging dose. For those who use pumps, just remember as you ascend, air bubbles in your pump can expand and you can have insulin delivered. And if you're dropping down, descending, air bubbles can shrink, you have less insulin. This may not be a problem with a pen because you're not using it continuously. However, you should check your pen for big bubbles when you're in the aircraft, just in case the cabin pressure has caused the air bubble to become bigger, and you may actually have a lower delivery of insulin. CGMs at the airport, what to know, you can go through security, and although it is advisable to avoid scanners that have electromagnetic emissions, most people, for short-term use, it does not affect the sensors. But it would probably affect the sensors if someone was going through a sensor throughout. And ensure you're carrying your medical letter. What about when you're in flight with a CGM? Now, during flight, CGMs may be a little bit, what would I say, inaccurate for several reasons. The cabin pressure can alter interstitial fluid. Remember, sensors bathe interstitial fluid. Interstitial fluid is what gives you your sugar reading. If you have a less bathing of the sensor, your sugars can be lower than what they really are. And of course, cabin pressure does affect glucose oxidase enzyme activity. So you may have differences in your sugars. So you must test your blood sugar when you're flying. The other thing that is important is to understand there is a delay. Dehydration when you're flying can cause, again, your interstitial fluid to give you wrong sugar readings. So it's important to keep this in mind, and the best way is someone to test when they are on flight, not to rely totally on their CGM. The next thing is, as we discussed, as was discussed by the previous speaker, the shift workers and why it's really important, because it does affect insulin resistance. There are challenges with feeding, challenges with sleep. All these affect diabetes care. While we cannot change the fact that they can eat at this time or that time, what our roles is to really look at what medications would be safe for them and how they can monitor. So this is a slide I just put up. I summarized everything. I've color-coded it into green, yellow, and red. So for me, these regimes are quite safe, the green ones, for patients on shift work. But if you're on, for example, a bolus insulin, it must be given with the meal, not the timing. So that's important. So they must ensure when they have their meal, they can have their bolus, as long as it's 4 hours, in between the previous meal. That should be fine. The ones that are challenging and you need to be careful about are premixed insulin, because they are suitable for fixed regimes. NPH peaks at 6 hours. If it peaks at 6 hours, it doesn't know, are you on the lathe machine? Are you drilling something? So here you have risks to time. I'm going to take my injection and my break should be 6 hours later, because that's when my NPH will peak. So then you will have a challenge there, because you need some sort of flexibility in shift work. SUs, the older generation SUs, glimepiride and glibenclamide, probably should be avoided. But again, if it's the only way out, maybe you can look at modification of how they work. Maybe a snack in 1 hour or 2 hours to avoid the hypoglycemia. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we go to the Q&A question, I'll invite Peter, our patient, and Dr. Abdullahi kindly come for the panel. And before then, there's a QR code that will be displayed in front here. Where are your smartphones? Are you ready? Kindly project. So there's a form that you're supposed to fill. It's not projected yet.
In the meantime, those who have questions, kindly raise your hand so that the roving mic can come to you. And kindly introduce yourself and where you work before the question. So in the interest of time, please, anyone with a question right now, as we wait for the QR code to come up, please raise your hand to any of our speakers, our patient experience, Dr. Gaman's talk, and also Dr. Abdullahi is in the panel. We have a question from Betty. That's our first question. Thank you so much. Next question, please raise your hand. We have one here. Thank you. So let's tackle the questions as we wait for the QR code to come on screen.
Thank you very much. This is Betty Okere. I'm a dietitian. 2 questions. One to Dr. Gaman. How do you check for the potency of the insulin? And then usually the problem is when a patient comes and they already have insulin that is seemingly not working, but they're also coming from a resource-trained background. How would you work around that? Because you're not going to tell them to just throw it away. I know it makes sense, but does it to their pocket? And then to Peter, the next question is yours. Just before you got into the CGM, maybe you want to share with us a bit how difficult or easy it was to do the 6-point testing, and was it affecting you mentally, the fact that if I eat one thing, I have to always check? How was that for you? Thank you.
Because you don't know how it's stored. If insulin is frozen, it's protein, you'll tell. If you have premixed insulin and you shake it and it's not uniform, you know that there has been a problem, okay? So the question is here, I have someone who I know probably their insulin is not potent. And let me put in a spanner into a question. I'm now in Mandera, I have nothing else. This is only it, okay? I can go up by 5–10% on their dosaging to counteract and assume that maybe it's working at 80%. That could be risky, but I must be prepared to take that chance and monitor if I can, because I'm using insulin that is not probably totally at par at 90% efficacy. So that's a rough way you can look at it, okay? I think it's all a question of seeing. Some of us have known people who've used insulin that has expired, has been off the shelf, and it still did work. So what I'm trying to say is 90% is your cutoff. Below that, it's not recommended. But then, what do you do if you have a situation? You may have to adjust your dose. Yeah.
So my experience with manual prick, in fact, I had wanted to first do manual pricks for a month before I start working on CGM, just to see how it works out. But I ran out of fingers to prick because while the pricks are not painful, they do like remove some skin, and then I think at the time I was still fairly sick, so I wasn't healing properly. So all my fingers started having like marks, and then it was very hard to keep consistency in recording it became tiresome to do it just every time you're pricking. So that's why I moved, but it is good to keep doing it. Even if you're doing the prick, make sure you start with the most important ones: fasting sugar, before bed, before meal, after meal. And if you want to cut out some of them, you can start by pricking for specific meals so that you know, how do I react to ugali, how do I react to chapo. Once you've done some meals, you can drop them. I'm not a doctor, but this is my opinion. So you can drop them so that you know these meals affect me in this way. And then, but the fasting and the bed, even if it's a prick, I would recommend they keep doing that.
Peter, on the spotlight here, maybe for the benefit of the audience, I wanted to know what were your first emotions when you were initially diagnosed with diabetes, and what was your perception of diabetes in those first few weeks after diagnosis? What was your knowledge, what was your perception of what you knew earlier and what now you kept on learning day to day in those first few weeks?
Great question. So my mom and my grandmother have type 2 diabetes. So I used to buy for them kits for testing and other stuff. So I assumed it was not a serious condition. And even when I was first diagnosed, I was pretty sure it was type 2, because that's what, basically that's what they said you have. But upon reading up on it, so the first time I was told it's LADA, it's a form of type 1, there was some sort of, I was trying to say, no, it can't be. I don't know anyone else who has this thing. So there is some sort of denial. I was trivializing the problem because I didn't know about it. But upon learning, then I was shocked, or I was fearful of the condition until I met Dr. Gaman, and our first meeting, he told me I've had it over 20 years. Like, that was, you don't know how impactful that is, to meet someone who's had this condition that you are so afraid of because of what you're reading. People are going blind, and that's the feeling your patients will have. So if they can listen to a story from someone, I think it will be useful for them.
Let me take you back. So let's say right now, I am diagnosed with type 1 diabetes right now. What 3 things would you tell me?
So the first thing is, you're not alone. There are millions of people managing diabetes living their lives. Like as I said, I was at the coast last weekend. I was swimming, snorkeling, doing all those things without issues. So as long as you keep track of your sugar, so that the first thing is, you're not alone. It's something that many people are managing and doing it well. Secondly, learn to listen to your body. So the worst thing you can do is panic, especially not even as a patient, as a parent. If you have a child with newly diagnosed type 1, and then you go to the doctor, you get instructions, you start monitoring, you see it's going up, it's going down. You say, no, this doctor is not right. Let's go to do this person. Let's get a CGM. Let's get a this. So if you are driving the disease, you need to first calm down, take a few weeks to understand what's happening. And it's actually something you learn to live with. So calm down, understand your body. Then the third thing is, as a type 1 patient, or even I think for type 1 maybe LADA, is know how you'll react to hypo, how you'll react to hyper. If you do know that, if I get a 3.4 right now, or even less, what do I need to do immediately? And I have a simple sugar, I have a complex sugar. If I have a hyper, what do I need to do immediately? As long as you have that knowledge, you won't need to panic. You're not driven by fear. You know exactly what to do when it arises.
Thank you, Peter. You're still on the spotlight. So your coping mechanism here seems to be, one is your education, learning about the diabetes and knowing what to do in different situations. Is there any other coping strategies that you developed along the way? And how would you deal with burnout? Sometimes you just get tired. I'm checking my sugars all these times a day. I want to eat this food, but it's going to cause my sugar to go up. Do you get periods that you think about that, about the burn? You think about, what can I just cheat and eat what I should not eat?
I think you take it one day at a time. Even for tracking your sugar levels, I think I showed my chart, and it showed like all the days I was tracking. It wasn't that I was so hardworking that I did it. It's that I was tracking it one day at a time. Today I put what I did yesterday, what were my readings. Because I have a CGM, I'm able to do it gradually. But even before I got the CGM, I used to put in my data, and over time you're able to render a long chart of your history. And then I think coping mechanism, I think knowledge, not relying on myths and what people believe about the disease, about nutrition. Trying to get informed puts you ahead of the disease, so you feel like you're in control. Even if it's a disease, you feel like you're managing it. So I think that's been a coping mechanism, just learning.
Yeah.
Good
Yes.
Good afternoon. Dr. Sarah Wandia from Isiolo Regional Hospital. It's a military affiliated hospital. So my first question is to Dr. Gaman. I'm seeing young men who are coming for routine training to be better military staff. It's a very hot place, it's dry, it's dusty, and they are coming in with diabetes. I suspect, since I'm still very new, alcohol related due to chronic pancreatitis or autoimmune diabetes type. So by the time they are getting ready for discharge, they do need some form of insulin, but they are really, really jittery because of the nature of the work. They'll be in the bush most of the time. They're not going to take regular lunch breaks. So they are very worried about getting hypos, and some do get hypos. What experience, if any, would you have with someone who's behaving like a type 1 but can't sustain the basal-bolus regimen? What would you recommend? And then, thank you very much to the other speakers. I don't know when we do Q&A for our colleague, Dr. Mureithi, or that one passed. Are there any preventive strategies for a nurse who's concerned that now I have learned this shift work, I am pre-diabetic, over and above changing my schedules or requesting my boss? Because the last 3 years I've seen very many nurses, and they're very stressed, and they want transfers, and they want to move departments to somewhere where they don't do nights. But it's not always possible, and you start colliding with the hospital management because this person is a good worker, they don't want to lose them. So is there any way you can deal with the problems that that shift work has brought without causing them to lose their job?
Thank you very much for that question. It's a really tricky question. Unfortunately, the roles that we have are, transcend a lot of times. Not everybody will be able to get, night shifts. And that's the stark reality that we face within our profession. Nonetheless, information is power. It's the same way that the radiologists, have their counters for the number of hours. In aviation, what we do is, because we also wear a hat of the occupational health to formulate policies as we have been guided in the morning, to formulate useful policy to be able to have reduction, because this is the highest level. If we can be able to reduce the burden and by eliminating some of the risk factors, then we can be able to hopefully prevent them from becoming patients in the first place, which is the cheapest way of us managing diabetes long term. So if we look at the occupational health aspects and the shifts, then we can be able to hopefully put that. I hope that's helped to answer that question.
Yeah, that was a good question. You're talking about type 1 diabetics who are insulin-penic, whether it's from pancreatitis or an autoimmune process, and they don't want to take any injections. They don't want the basal bolus regime. Yeah. So here we have 2-3 scenarios that are playing into my mind. They need a basal insulin. If they are coming back to base every evening, for example, then maybe a premixed insulin because they will be having a meal. Or could you do a basal plus 1 injection a day? So you must kind of tailor-make that regime. So I was thinking through, if they're coming back to base in the evening, maybe short-acting and a basal for their meal, or a premixed. If you know, that would help them at least throughout the day, and they're not having much during the day. But then again, you need to kind of observe their profiles to make decisions. If funds were easily available and costs were not a problem, a longer acting basal insulin may be better if they are going out for longer periods, like Tresiba, insulin degludec, things like that. But it's not easy to be active and insulinopenic because you're high risk for ketosis.
Just a moment. Mine is not a question. Actually, I just want is a statement of appreciation. You know, it's not every time that we get someone who's brave enough, who's a patient, to come and stand in front of healthcare workers and share their experience with us with how they manage their diabetes. Secondly, he actually created an app overnight on how to manage his diabetes. That tells you necessity is the mother of invention. So all of you can log in and check mysukariapp.com. It has great insights with what he's doing, and I'm sure it will go a long way in helping many other people out there. So can we give him a round of applause?
So, Peter, thank you so much for your input today. It strengthens a lot of the doctors here to see that patients also can take control of their lives. It's very, very important. And I wanted to know from your end, how has your family, your friends, and the doctors that you've interacted, how have they shaped your journey so far? What are some of the challenges you got, and what are some of the successes? I know you've mentioned quite a number, but maybe you can also just highlight that for us.
Yeah, my family has been very supportive, I think, and friends. There have been challenges with misinformation, specifically with type 2 diabetics, where the things they know about, it's not from doctors, they just researched. So I don't know if there is a gap in the level of information that's given to type 2 diabetics, but they were supportive. Because there is some experience with pricks, all that, I was able to very quickly learn how to use them. There was less stigma in using them. And then the doctors, Dr. Ombui has been, I think it was perfect that I was landed in his care, because even the tools I worked on, he was supportive of it. His explanations of everything that I needed to do, meeting Saulo, the nutritionist and educationist, so all that drove, most of the apps I've worked on are because of those experiences. And then I met Dr. Gaman. We were talking about how to gauge carb counting. So there's a tool for carb counting. It's directly related from that. I met Grace and Yvonne. So about CGMs, there's a tool for CGMs. So the more I'm interacting with people, and almost the KDSG team, Roslyn and Dr. Roslyn, Dr. Eric, it's been so positive, and everyone is just welcoming. So the community is very nice.
Thank you, Peter. As I can see now, I think your role is evolving from a patient to an educator and hopefully to an advocate. So we hope to engage you more in the future in all our conferences around the country, so that you can be able to give hope to also the health professionals that these things work. You have now the experience with CGMs. We are also trying to build capacity in that end, because CGMs is the way to go. It gives you so much more data beyond just knowing what your sugar is. And that's what Dr. Gaman was saying, even for the patients in Isiolo. The profiles, the CGM would give you the profiles that you need to determine now whether you're going to do a basal insulin, whether you're going to add a premix insulin. So I think it's also an area that us as the medical fraternity, we have to figure out a way of making sure that these CGMs are accessible and affordable to our patients.
Yeah, thanks a lot. My name is Morito from Morito Healthcare. It's a new facility integrated South Nairobi. My question goes to Dr. Mureithi. Yeah, in the matatu industry, they normally say they don't break rules, they bend them. And I know we bend rules when it comes to sleeping. However, my question is, how about resting? What's your opinion about having a rest maybe once a week, a whole day? I don't know, studies maybe have shown that they also have an impact on our biology, our metabolism. What's your take? Because we talk a lot about sleep, but rarely do we talk about resting one day in a week.
So that's our last question. After.
Okay, so I'll try and unpack that. By rest, I would hope that you mean that at some point there will be quality sleep involved. Remember when we were discussing this, we had your circadian day, what looks like what the rhythm for the day and the night. So when you rest also matters. So there are many inputs that you'll be getting, there's sunlight. So if you're able to completely black out during the day, I'm not sure whether that will sufficiently cover some of the debt that you might have, because there'll be lots of movement as well around the house. There are other factors for when you're going to then wake up and eat. So all these things may not necessarily give you the sort of quality of rest that you require. What you need is consistency with time, unfortunately. So even if you're going to be, working flat out on some days, you have your shifts at night, other days you're working during the day, the risk, I don't think it will be one-to-one that one day of rest is going to cancel out the rest, because your circadian rhythm still has to, cycle, and you'll still have the same changes that have occurred chronically over the week. So that one day may help somewhat, but I don't think it's going to be significant enough to shift your circadian rhythm and give you the benefit that you're looking for with one solid day. So unfortunately, it doesn't work that way.